going to break down my opinion of the quarterback battle so far, starting from day one all the way through day 10 scrimmage on Sunday. And I'm filming it while day 11 practice is going on. So there's a good chance the second part of this video may prove or may disprove everything I think I know from the first part. Make sure you stick around to the end. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So before we jump into the quarterback battle, as it were, as I kind of see it at this point on Tuesday morning, I do want to point out this is kind of a continuation, even though it was almost a month or over a month ago. The video that I made about Saints training camp showdown right before camp opened, and that was the one also referencing some of the concepts that I learned, and hopefully you did too, from Football Merit's channel, which is a young man who's a wide receiver for University of Wyoming, who, like I say, is kind of my version of football for dummies, where he can explain stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got it now. So, and I'll make sure to put the video up here somewhere, a link to it, and I'll have it on the end card just in case you want to go back and look at some of the stuff I was saying, or go back and there's a clip in there where you can go to his page and find that video if you want to watch it yourself. But as it stands right now, I'm feeling like Spencer Rattler's QB1. Um, this is not anything disparaging on the other two quarterbacks. We'll talk about them in a minute. But all along, I felt like he was starting off from the position of he's the unconfirmed starter from the second Kellen Moore walked in the building and Derek Carr retired. So I based it basically on he's the only one with, and I don't even know if you can call it significant experience as an NFL quarterback playing in an actual NFL game during the season, but he has significant experience compared to the other two guys. So he played in 7 games, started 6. He had 395 total snaps, 285 pass, 110 run. That's over a 2-to-1 ratio pass to run. It's already a problem right there. Um, you really have to have a top rookie quarterback to be able to come in and throw it more than you run it to that ratio. And again, not disparaging Spencer Rattler, but he's not Jane Daniels. He's not, any of those guys who were able to do it from the jump. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just overall, it puts him in a bad position, kind of starting off. More on that in a second, because when you look at I took a look at his PFF grades, which I knew weren't good, and found one pleasant surprise. But overall, they had him at 52%, which is, when we need barely passing, a smidge, maybe 49% passer rating. Okay, no, not passing, but 71% rushing. I didn't realize that they had him graded that high. I didn't really know if he had enough running attempts. I guess he did to on 110 run snaps. Most of those are handoffs, right? So grain of salt on that grade, but we did realize that he can move. He's got mobility and the ability to get downfield and pick up some yards when he needs to. So that kind of came out, I guess, a little bit because look, he was under duress. There's no doubt about it. So was Haener. There's no getting around that. But even under the duress of all the bad things last season, you know, it's hard for me to say he was good, but at times he was good. And a few times he was very good. Um, he had some very bright spots in both of the Tampa Bay games, and he had some not good spots at all in both of them also. And I think that each one of those games is kind of a microcosm of his whole entire season. And you have to give him props. I feel like you do. I was at the game, and that second half in Washington, when he came in, especially that 2-minute drill, was some really good, outstanding work on his part. Now, we referenced the video that I was talking about at Football Merit. He develops a whole thing to the 2-minute drill. And a lot of what he talked about, if you think back to what Spencer Rattler was doing in the Washington game, it's one of the signs of, you know, good quarterback play. Grain of salt. He had the chance to do it again in the second Tampa Bay game, last game of the season, and it started out the first 3 or 4 plays pretty good, and then it all went to hell after that drive stalled out, we turn the ball over. So even that is kind of a microcosm. He pulled one off and one of them not so much. That's just kind of what you had to work with during the season, but you realize there's a lot of experience to draw from there with a lot of good quarterback coaching and coordinating and play calling that should be at his disposal. That should help him. In most games, you could at least, at some point, no matter how bad overall he played, you could see glimpses of, you know, an arm talent or some mobility that you're looking at and going, yeah, if you could get that from him more and more and more, you're going to get a better quarterback. But at other times, and it has nothing to do with his ability, it looked a little over his skis, a little stressed. But again, with the duress he was facing, it's understandable. You just, hope, as Kellen Moore likes to say, that's the adversity that he's overcome and he's made the adjustments and he can do a much, much better job of handling a lot of those situations. But like I'm saying, thought overall, there's a lot to work with initially with him, and it's the arm talent and mobility that I have seen that goes modern age of quarterbacks. You really, really need that unless you're going to roll out with a team that has an insanely great offensive line and a defense is going to hold up and not put your offense in bad positions. And right now, I cannot say I would like to, and I think we're headed in the right direction, but I definitely can't say that about our offensive line or our defense right now. So at times also, I thought he made good decisions, especially under some of those duress situations. And at times he didn't, that's just the way it is. And so I kind of rolled up this as a recap of really what I said after last season was over, talking about Spencer Rattler. And I still stand by this. I think his floor is an NFL backup quarterback / journeyman starter. And again, no disrespect, because there's a lot of guys that try to play quarterback in the NFL that can't even approach that status. I don't think he's one of them. I think he's at least that. Two names that kind of pop into mind: Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater types, both who have stuck around in the league a long, long time. Now they've had to do it on numerous different teams, but they're still around, or at least Brissett is, and Bridgewater apparently can come back playoff time anytime he wants to back up in Detroit, because that's what he did last season. But yeah, I think he has enough talent there that you could develop him with a ceiling as a legitimate NFL starter. It just may take time. It may take a couple of seasons. You may be looking at 2027, 2028 to where he's at that level. It's something we've seen before. And granted, most of these were much more highly touted quarterbacks coming out of college. But I think the principle is still the same when you're talking about Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield. They're the most recent examples that come to mind. But there's been others throughout the NFL that has done basically what they did, because Sam Darnold's the maybe. Like, maybe he finally got it together. He had a really good year in Minnesota last year. In Seattle, gave him a bunch of money to be their starter to replace Geno Smith, who went through the same thing when he showed up at Seattle. And suddenly he was legit and pretty good NFL starting quarterback. And of course, we know Baker Mayfield's story. He's probably the hugest success story of the three. He is of the three. And he's been kind of kicking our ass the last couple of years in Tampa Bay as a starting quarterback. So I don't know if Rattler falls anywhere in there, but I feel like when you're looking at the talent and some of the glimpses he gave us last year, that possibility exists. But he may have to go to a different team to do it. It may not happen here. It may be a situation where a couple of stops down the road, a la Mayfield, all of a sudden it clicks, everything comes together, and you get that quarterback that you thought you might have when you drafted him. Even though he's a fifth round pick, there was a lot of people last year's draft going, they've got a starting caliber quarterback in the fifth round for the Saints. So you have not a lot tied into him. It's not you took a huge risk, but you have a chance for a big reward and payoff. And if it doesn't, the ability to move on. So I think right now, like I said, I don't know how firm that grasp is, but I think he's got a grasp on QB1, and I think he's still got some value, because I brought up Jacoby Brissett for a reason. Because in the back of my mind, and I think Bobby Amer mentioned this post practice show a couple of days ago, or last week, that you could see a situation where New England 2024 is playing out because Jacoby Brissett, one of the reasons why I picked him as an example is the floor. He's basically the bridge quarterback till Drake May was ready. So it took 5 games. Game 6, Drake May gets to start, ran out the season, and Brissett has moved on to Arizona or Cleveland or somewhere else. I'm not really sure where he's at, but he's not New England anymore. And there's a possibility that all along, that may be the reference that the Saints were looking at. Looking at Shough, truly believing he's our quarterback of the future, but we're not going to put him out there till he's ready. We need a bridge quarterback. Well, we've got a guy with some experience who's shown some talent that we can develop. And on the offhand chance, like I said, you get the ultimate reward where it all clicks together and he doesn't have to wait 2-3 years and change teams for it to come true, that it happens here, whether it's this year or next year or however it shakes out. And then suddenly, holy crap, we found what we needed for. So I think Rattler, that's the position he's sitting in. He's got the chance to do great things as his ceiling, as I said. I don't know if my expectations are that high right now, but you never know. More than likely, I think safe enough bridge quarterback if indeed we have to go that route. But I think even that may be a little shaky as we kind of look at what I think is a legit battle for number 2 between Haener and Shough. One of the real questions we're looking at here is how real of a quarterback battle are they having for QB2? Because I think right now it's a legit quarterback battle for a couple of reasons. And kind of going with the, if Rattler's a bridge quarterback theory, and I think there may be some validity to that. Haener's experience might be what's keeping him in the conversation, which is why they were willing to alternate him with first team reps, although he kind of lagged behind in that. And we'll talk more on that later. But I think it was enough to keep him in the race so they can figure out Shough, because this is what I'm looking at it this way. Because if Shough still isn't ready and something happens to Rattler, do you want to throw Shough in there as an unready quarterback? Could you not quite possibly be repeating the same scenario Rattler found himself thrown in last season and repeat another mistake in this sense that you exposed the rookie who's not ready in your estimation in the best set of circumstances into a very bad situation because the starter went down. And if it's anything like last year, a lot of that has to do with other players having gone down, and just not to relive it, but the circumstances we were going through. So, I mean, it's no offense to Spence Rattler because I don't think this is his fault, but the plan that it happened to him, and it did hurt him and hurt his play. And what a lot of people, I think's opinion may be based on just the really bad aspects you saw from him. Some of it definitely his fault, but some of them just unintended consequences of what happened last year. Because it seems to me the plan in 2024, if they actually had one for the quarterbacks, was to get Carr ready with the rest of the offense to go out, win the division, and make a play deep into the playoffs and make a run. I don't think they gave a thought. It doesn't seem like to anything as well. What if something happens to Carr and we lose him for significant periods of time? Because they couldn't even make up their mind which one of between Haener and Rattler was the actual backup. You had neither one ready to go at any point until they had to step out on the field and try to play. That's not the way to develop a rookie quarterback. I think a lot of teams tried that over the years. Even recently, Bryce Young in Carolina's popping to mind, just going, well, we think he's ready, and roll him out there at a situation where he's definitely not ready. You haven't prepared him enough, and the team around him is not good enough to support the fact that he's in no way, shape, or form at a level that can overcome the deficiencies around him. Offensive line, pass catchers, defense, and everything else going on. So I think Kellen Moore's process all along, number one, my best bet is Rattler. So make sure Rattler is ready to be some semblance of an actual QB1. We're developing this from the jump that he's going to be the starter, and that's how we're going to treat it until he screws it up or somebody else takes it from him. And I think that's kind of in the scenario we're in right now. Second thing up, Haener's got the most 3 years in the NFL and some actual game experience. Make sure Haener's ready to be the legitimate backup if something goes down the Rattler, so we don't have to throw Shough to the wolves if it comes down to that. And if Shough is going to be ready to become the number two, then we know he's that much closer to being ready to be the number one. Talking about his fans and people watching, going, okay, now we're not so worried if and when something happens to Rattler. Shough should be able to come in and at least finish a game or tap into the number two role for however long we need it. Decisions will be made from there, jumping way ahead, but you get the point I'm trying to make. So I think when this all rolls out and supposedly he's, you know, saying that they think they've got it figured out and the decision may be coming soon, and it may be coming as soon as the end of this practice that's going on while I'm filming this. It could be, because they are leaving tomorrow to go to California, do some work there, and play in a preseason game. The goal may be to have the pecking order decided 1, 2, 3 at that point, and that's what we're going to roll and then reevaluate later. Not the easiest process and decision to make right now, but I think that's kind of where we at. And just to me, in my opinion, the logical process, Rattler hasn't done anything to not convince you, yeah, he needs his shot as the QB1. Who's the two out of Haener and Shough? Wherever we put Shough, can we handle what he's got to handle and still develop him? So I think the tipping point may be when all this gets announced and we finally kind of get a sense of what they're thinking along these lines. Is a lot can be read into where is Shough slotting into? Is he QB2? Is he QB3? If he's QB1 by some, and I'm missing this by a mile, and it is possible because we're going to talk about, I think all three of them are relatively close right now, and we're missing this by a mile, then we're having a whole different conversation. And I think at that point, Haener is probably going to be the backup just based on the fact that, and I'll end it with this thought, the more you look at their styles, their abilities, and everything about them, I just keep going back to the fact that in arm talent, mobility, and a lot of the stuff that, not everything, but a lot of the stuff they do the same, Rattler and Shough are a lot closer to each other than either one of the two is to Haener. And going back to Kellen Moore talking about, they asked him earlier in training camp, are all three quarterbacks running basically the same scheme, or have you started tailoring any part of it to the specific quarterback? And he answered, no, they're all running the same. We're evaluating all at the same level. So I think the game plan, the hopefulness that they're looking at is Rattler, Shough being 1 and 2, and that's the offense we're going to run, and both of them being ready. And I think the linchpin, the key to the whole thing is Tyler Shough's readiness to be an NFL quarterback. Now, real quick, I wanted to just kind of dive into the quarterback totals for practices 1 through 10. Ross Jackson, I mentioned this in the last video. He's been charting this out every day. And sometimes during practices, like he did in the scrimmage, he's able to chart one out while it's going on, and you can pick up some numbers on Twitter. But he posted everything for the whole season, the totals. And I thought it was interesting. I think there's some things in there worth mentioning. Um, it seems it includes 7 versus 7 and 11 the 11 drills, and obviously that encompasses the scrimmage. So I think it's just the running total from 1 to 10 in these type situations. Um, Now I do know that some drills, completions, touchdowns, stuff like that, may judged for lack of a better word, um, because there's no contact. Whether he would have come down with the ball or whether he'd have been able to score after he caught it, that sort of thing. So you don't know 100% sure as much as, like, say, the scrimmage, when clearly he's going to get tackled or not tackled, or he's clearly going to catch the ball, whatever. So let's say some of these numbers may be a little estimated. And as far as I know, nobody has charted drops. They mentioned some happening, um, like in the scrimmage, Tyler Shough would have had a second touchdown pass. Seth Green, they seems like he'd have been credited with a drop on that play, and you come away with nothing. So I would say stats, they kind of say that normally when you get stats like this, any type of numbers, that you're trying to paint a picture of a player. And I think out of context, you can't do it. And in context, the best you could probably do is you more like painting a house and not necessarily a picture. But I think there's a little bit of value in there. So what Ross Jackson had for his finals, Rattler 83 for 114, 72.8%, 8 touchdowns thrown, 2 touchdown rushes, and 4 interceptions. Overall, not that bad. Probably want to get those interceptions down a little bit, but I think other than that, you're looking at it and going, yeah, that feels about right. Shough, 67 for 108, 62%, 5 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions, and those have kind of come in bunches lately. Um, I think he went the longest without throwing an interception of the 3. Haener, 78 for 112, 69.6%, 5 TD passes, 1 interception. I think Rattler and Haener are probably overall better numbers, but they're kind of so close in a lot of areas that, you see some significant numbers that, like the interception totals for Rattler and Shough as opposed to Haener is kind of a big jump. Completion percentage for Shough is significantly lower than Haener and definitely Rattler, that sort of thing. But I think overall better numbers, you'd probably say Rattler and Haener. Now Haener snaps probably may have more 7-on-7s than the rest of them, and I think they would more than likely have a lot more 11-on-11s than he does, and 11-on-11s especially by virtue of the scrimmage, because I think they kind of really outpaced him on Sunday. Um, Rattler, he's got the least number of stats with the threes. Haener more than likely, I don't know this for sure, probably the most with the threes, but um, one thing I will say about Haener, because I don't want to make it sound like he had the easiest road, because if you stop and think about it, the first 2 practices, and I believe they were 3 and 6, where almost everybody was in agreement. Finally, the offense had a great day and outplayed the defense. That was the 2 days when he ran with the ones. So I think you kind of have to try the best you can to put numbers like this in the context, but I think, you know, you can put some thought on it and with that context. And I think really the 2 major takeaways I came up with out of that is, one, Kellen Moore is probably wishing he had about 2 more weeks of training camp to really work with all 3 of them and evaluate all 3 of them, because I think right now, heading into California, it's Rattler with, let's call it, an uncomfortable lead at QB1. Well, Haener at best is holding off Shough, and at worst, he's in a true deadlock with him. And the closer Shough is to number 2, the closer he's getting to number 1. And I think 2 more weeks, 1 more live scrimmage and all that before you get to a preseason game, which obviously isn't going to happen. I think where they could clearly delineate those lines and know exactly where they are, and clearly go into preseason with, we know this guy's getting the number 1 reps. We know this guy's getting the number 2 reps and the leftovers for number 3. And I'm not sure we're quite there yet, and I think those numbers kind of back it up, because there's no real separation where one has outpaced the other 2, or where one has fallen so far behind you're thinking, yeah, that's it for him. He's the 3, and we're going to concentrate on the other 2. So wind up this section. The next part will be the day 11 practice report, and I'm suspecting when the media talks to Kellen Moore after practice, there may be some more clarity on this as they pack it up tomorrow and head to California. Practice report for day 11 practice didn't really clear anything up, as it turns out. The overall kind of word that I saw a couple of times on Twitter, sluggish practice, not sharp, kind of using that. And not a lot of talk about what actually went on in practice. Did see him mention they worked a lot on situational stuff like third down. I believe that was majority of practice, if I understood that correctly. And the big takeaways is kind of who was there, who wasn't, and how rotations worked. Um, Offense, it was a quarterback rotation of started Rattler with the ones, Shough with the twos, Haener with the threes. Second day in a row that's happened, which is the first time in practice they've had back to back days. That being said, at some point during practice, it was noted that Shough and Rattler traded off. So Shough finished with the ones, Rattler finished with the twos, Haener stayed with the threes. Don't know if that tells us Haener is locked the three, and now we have a battle for 1 and 2, which would totally throw my theory from the first segment out the window, or if this is more, we're trying to get more looks with Shough and Haener with the ones and the twos. So there may be a situation where, as they leave for California tomorrow, they're going to practice in the afternoon. So they'll have a practice Thursday afternoon and a scrimmage on Friday, albeit Kellen Moore acknowledged not 126. It's going to be much lighter. On 126 plays, it's going to be lighter on the number of plays they run it in. But I think the rotation there with quarterbacks may start clearing some of this stuff up. It is noted the only thing that it really was mentioned in practice, one, the pass catchers seemed to have a problem catching the ball. That was brought up that they might have had a little bit of a drop problem going on today. And Shough's first pass when he moved to the ones was almost picked, and a little later on he was picked by Jordan Howden. So, and Jordan Howden was running with the ones. We'll get to why in a second. Special teams, Charlie Smith, it was his turn, and he went 3 for 5 with his misses being an extra point and a 51-yarder. Get to player availability. This is what kind of went on today. It sounded like that they were not a lot of veterans. Some of the veterans were having light days, almost like rest days. In the case of Howden started with the ones in Jordan Reed's spot, and Jordan Reed, it sounds like worked in a little bit, but Howden got the majority of the reps. Also, that may indicate that Howden is the primary backup to Reed, and he's getting more looks and more reps in there. Again, we'll see how this plays out in future practices, but I don't think in any way, shape, or form uh, Reed's job's in danger of being taken away by Jordan Howden. But hey, you never know. Same thing with Eric McCoy. Clapp was running a lot of first team snaps, but McCoy was around getting involved a little bit. Quincy Riley was noted as working with the ones at cornerback, but no offset of whether somebody was injured, hurt, rest day, or if it was just a light day for one of the corners, either McKinstry or Yidam or both. And Riley was getting some more snaps with the ones in there. And recap, the big thing I think Kellen Moore talking post practice and was um, some players will sit against the preseason game against the Chargers. He confirmed Alvin is definitely one of them, but no decision on who else will sit. And he was mentioned specifically in the running back room that um, they've got to chop up some reps, and they're trying to kind of figure out how to do it. And Moore was saying on the running back room, he's quoted as, they're all worthy. There's not one guy in there that can't make the 53-man roster. So he's got a high valued opinion on all of them, and unfortunately, he's going to be missing one because as we get to the injury report, um, the good news, JT Gray returned to practice. Sounds like he's full go. Juwan Johnson was held out, and they're saying he's kind of day to day. So, we'll see how that plays out. In the comments, we were having a discussion about how important he is in the red zone. Wasn't there for the scrimmage to do it. That we need him healthy. We need to get him back, and he needs to be healthy this year. But the running back injury was Devin Neal um, with a hamstring injury, and sounds like he's going to miss a couple of weeks. So we managed to make it 10 days before running into one of these, which is, I haven't crunched the numbers, but feels like 1,000% improvement over what was going on last year at this time when it came to stuff like that. Also, they mentioned that Mookie Dixon missed practice. He wasn't there, undrafted free agent. I believe he's a corner. Um, no reason given why. Don't know if it's injury excused or what have you. So, all in all, I'm going to keep an eye on these player rotations, but specifically quarterback. Nothing practice when Kellen Moore was talking, he just didn't acknowledge that. I shouldn't say didn't acknowledge, didn't speak, confirm anything on what an actual quarterback rotation is going to look like, even who's going to play. Who knows? Uh, or when they'll play, or how many snaps they'll get, or any of that stuff. So that's kind of up in the air. The only one we know specifically is Alvin won't play, but it sounds like some other veterans are going to sit or work on a light load, and I'm sure they'll keep asking, and maybe we'll hear something before they actually kick the game off this weekend. So I think really the takeaway is when they practice Thursday afternoon in California, when they scrimmage on Friday afternoon, kind of seeing, looking at the quarterback, where the snaps are falling, who's running with who. And at some of those other positions, seeing things where you can get a little glimpse of, you know what, Jordan Howden may have a really secure spot on this team as the primary backup to Justin Reed, and factor into what Brandon Staley wants to do on defense. So I think there's a couple spots floating around there that you know may get a little sneaky information depending on where they're falling in the depth chart and how much playing time they're getting with ones as opposed to twos. So that's what we have for you today. A little bit of homework. I'm going to try to remember on the communities tab post. In fact, I'm going to try to do that as soon as I finished up this video. A poll as to what position groups do we want to talk about next. We did defensive backs, more or less did quarterback, and that one's still up in the air and will be for a little bit. But looking at offensive line, the defensive front, the pass catchers. So I'll put it up there. Just when you see it, throw up a vote for me if you don't mind, and I'll kind of run it. Make a list, kind of basically based on the response and the percentage of highest to lowest. So if you wouldn't mind doing that for me, and if you wouldn't mind also hitting the subscribe button, hitting the like button, hitting the share, letting your I appreciate people who are letting other Saints fans know and saying, hey, come check me out. The support is incredible. We're still ticking up with the support, and my goal of 950 before we kick off is starting to get more and more real, where I'm thinking maybe I can raise that number by the time we kick it off against Arizona, and I can only do it with your help. And thank you very much for everything y'all are doing. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out, and who dat.